Hey, guys.
Hey, Chelsea.
Hi.
Thanks for joining. We got, I think, most folks in the room. It's luck for you.
I'm so used to sitting alone. Maybe I've gotten into this. Bonnie, can you hear me, Suzanne?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, it's Tuesday, October 17th. It's a Pickens County Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Present right now, we have Jeff, Jasmine, Doug. And it looks like we have Chelsea and Suzanne online. And I guess we'll start and see if we have any commissioner comments. Anybody? Not pertaining to the item tonight.
So I've one, which is a disclosure. So I was recently appointed to a state board on behalf of the American Institute of Architects to the state wildlife, urban wildfire interface board. It's a 25-person board. It's organized by the state. First meeting is 5 hours on Friday. You're welcome to zoom in. I am the only it looks like 5 personnel on the board. So it was through the American Institute of Architects. So it does not conflict with my P&Z duties. And it's as per the home rule charter and everything else. It says you can sit on multiple boards, it's not counting. And we have 2 years to update. They're actually, for those of you that are really interested, there's a wonderful $50, ICC book out called the IWUIC. This is my copy, but that's my disclosure. But yeah,
Congratulations. Anyone else? Staff comments?
Just one thing, we are coming to you in December, I think it's the 6th, with the Redstone Castle, with the new owners and their new plan for the castle. We were thinking about trying to schedule a site visit, and we suddenly thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could get the P&Z and the BOCC all at once and then just do it once. We went to the BOCC first because their schedules are kind of complicated. And I guess we've gotten an option from them for Halloween at 10:30 in the morning. So just putting that out there for you. If people are able to make that work, I think we'll, kind of go for that, but just kind of putting it out there would be great. I think it's a great opportunity to see it before you hear the application. But we'll check in and send you an invite for that and see if people are able to join in on that, but I think that was all.
Actually,
Oh, sorry.
if I may, I'd like to introduce Hannah Hunt Muller, who is our new senior long-range planner. And we're really excited to have her on our community development department team. So you will be seeing a lot of her in the coming months.
And she's been a big help
A big,
pulling all of this together for you today, so. It's been a big team effort, but Hannah has been a big help on that team, so it's been great.
yes.
Awesome. Well, then, go ahead. No, I guess we have our first item on the agenda for the public hearing, so just staff on
So we're gonna start off with, Kara's gonna kind of kick off sort of your evening. And then we'll, jump into just sort of laying out the process we're gonna walk through tonight. And then we'll jump into more of the staff presentations on the items, so.
Good evening. Well, hi, everyone. I don't think I've been in front of P and Z in this iteration in quite some time. So for those, Kara Silbernagel, Deputy County Manager, and I was overseeing the Community Growth Advisory Committee on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners and working very closely with community development and staff on what is before you tonight. So before we really hand it off to the planning staff, I just kind of wanted to give a little bit of background. The last time you saw some of this work might have been at the joint meeting in June with the Board of County Commissioners of the Community Growth Advisory Committee, and why the proposals that are in front of you for consideration tonight are in front of you tonight. So just really, this is coming at you as the board really sees that there is a climate crisis and is very committed to the work that is ahead, that there is an urgency and a necessity to be doing something to address the climate crisis, and recognizing that the built environment in Pitkin County, the land use code, is one of the biggest levers that there is to pull. That being said, the board remains very committed to implementing the entire recommendations of the Community Growth Advisory Committee, but also had requested moving things and finding options for early action and phasing to not just wait the 18 to 24 months. So just wanted to use that and kind of do an overview of how we got here, and then what's before you this evening. So just a quick overview. Back in 2019, the board declared a climate emergency. That really is, you're going to hear a lot. It's a changed circumstances that really led to then the Board of County Commissioners recognizing that and establishing the Community Growth Advisory Committee to evaluate the land use code, what could be done to really help address the climate emergency and the goals that they had set forth. As well as not just the climate, but the community goals as well. In May, the Community Growth Advisory Committee presented their final recommendations to both the P&Z and the BOCC. And at that time, the board had asked for a phasing strategy for implementation, wanted staff to come back and say, how do we do all this? How do we move it forward? And how do we take action? So staff presented in September options for both carrying forth the full recommendations, which is anticipated to be about 18 to 24 months, as well as outlined a couple immediate options options that could be brought forward in order to start to really address the needs that are before the community and the really the climate crisis. So at that meeting, the board really committed to continuing the effort of implementing the growth committee recommendations, but also heard a lot of concerns and feedback from various members of the committee at that time, and responded and altered that staff recommendation to looking at a 9250 house size rather than the 8750 that was presented. So at that meeting, the board directed staff and wanted to see moving forward an amendment to the comprehensive plan and the land use code for P&Z consideration that looks at reducing the maximum floor area in unincorporated Pitkin County to 9250, which is the proposal and what is before you all tonight, while continuing to move forward with the implementation of the entire growth committee recommendations. So I will pause there, and then if there's any questions before we hand it over to the planning staff.
So I can jump in next. So right, there are two items in front of you tonight. The amendments to the comp plan and then the land use code text and zoning amendments. And just to talk a little bit about the difference in the process on those two items. The first, the P and Z adoption of the comp plan amendments is a resolution. This under state statute is under the authority of the planning commission, similar to when you've adopted caucus area master plans. So this is a public hearing for this adoption. This is not an item that then goes forward to the BOCC for their approval. The P and Z is the final authority for approval of the comp plan amendments. So then that sort of lays some of the groundwork to move forward to the text amendments. So that would, the P and Z would be making a recommendation to the BOCC by resolution. So this is a public meeting for that item. We've discussed ahead of time that we will, we'll be taking public comment for the public hearing for the comp plan. We will also take public comment for the text amendments. I know for signups, we've tried to sort of get people to identify which one they're commenting on. We will be limiting people to 3 minutes. So, probably the issues are intertwined in everyone's minds, but if you're looking to provide comments on the comp plan specifically, as well as the text amendments, you'd have the opportunity to comment separately on those. But so there will be public comment taking. This will then, your recommendation would go forward to the BOCC for adoption by ordinance, and that takes 2 readings. So there will be at least 2 meetings in front of the BOCC, one of which will be a public hearing as this moves forward. I think the only other thing I wanted to add before we move on is that what wasn't included in your packet were a couple of letters we received from the public. Sorry, they didn't make it into your packet. But we're working on a different system for people to submit public comments and trying to then make sure we capture them. So just wanted to put on the record that those were comments from Joe Wells, from Max Phyllis, and from Blake Hansen, all of whom were members of the Community Growth Advisory Committee. So just for the record, those will be included. And those were all emailed out to the P&Z yesterday.
Suzanne,
yes.
excuse me, I have a question about just that. May I ask it now?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
The letters that weren't included in our packets, I know you were just referring to, are those going to be read into the record today so that people who are here for the public hearing get to hear what those concerns are? I mean, as I was trying to sign on for this meeting, and I had some considerable trouble today signing on, I saw that there's one that has come from Max that I haven't had a chance to read yet. How are you going to deal with those?
I had not planned to read them into the record, but I guess I would look to the P&Z, chair and other members. If you want those to be read into the record, I can certainly pull them up and read them.
Yeah, I mean, if you think we need to do that, then we can, or we can also include them in the packet for the
Okay,
next week. Would that
Yeah,
be-
anything that's been submitted
Yeah.
will then go forward into,
Yeah.
BOCC packets as well, but,
Okay.
if think, so yeah, I leave that up to you all if you want me to.
okay, well, because the ones that I think that you've received, I haven't read Max's yet, I have read Joe's, will then also have we'll have 2 readings at the BOCC, then I'll at least know that they're going to be heard there. Has everybody else on the P&Z had a chance to read those letters that weren't in the packet?
Yes, I think Max's is a 1.5 pages, so you can quick scan it if you want, Suzanne, but yeah, I've had a chance to read it.
Okay, has everybody else?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you. I will start. Staff is proposing amendments to the overview of the Pickens County Comprehensive Plan, which was adopted by the Planning and Zoning Commission in 2003. So it's been around for a while. It's 20 years old. Bear with me. I'm going to give a broad overview of the changes that are proposed and then dial down to a little more detail. The proposed changes will, as a whole, will integrate the Community Growth Advisory Committee recommendation for maximum house size, reduce maximum floor area in unincorporated Pickens County to 9,250 square feet as recommended in that Growth Committee report, and integrate master plan updates that have taken place since 2003. You all have been involved in several of those. So then specifically, the amendments that are proposed to the comprehensive plan we're just touching on two sections of the plan. One is the section summarizing adopted county plans, and the other is an amendment to a portion of the section which is the common themes among the county plans compilation. And then finally, we are going to amend the title of the 2003 overview of the Pickens County Comprehensive Plan to simplify it just to the Pickens County Comprehensive Plan, which is how it is referred to in the land use code. Next slide. Okay, so this is where you want to bear with me for the big overview. This is a Cindy Hubin diagram for those of you who recognize her graphic approach. This was an anatomy of the land use code. I'm not going to go into detail to walk through the whole thing, but what I wanted to point out here is really in the lower right-hand quadrant of this graphic, that quadrant identifies on the far right in the turquoise, you'll see caucus master plans. And I really think of these as the grassroots input on local, on land use policies for Pickens County. And those caucus master plans, as you know, have addressed distinct issues for geographic areas, for the caucus areas. But what we found is that while they have some distinct recommendations for each area, they also all have some common themes. And one of those that has persisted since 2003 is, as an example, preservation of rural character. And we continue to hear about that today. So those are advisory documents, and because they are for individual caucus areas or neighborhood areas, they are then compiled in the Pickens County Comprehensive Plan. And that's the plan that looks at the county as the county as a whole, right? So it pulls together all of those common themes. And those are advisory documents, but they lay the foundation for land use policy direction and land use actions in the county and in the land use code. So just to give you that bigger picture, thank you for indulging me and letting me use this diagram. And then we can move on. So this map shows all of the master plan areas that exist in the county. Most of them are for caucus areas. There are a few urban growth boundary area master plans as well. And these plans, most of them were initially adopted in 2003. Some were adopted later, but because we do need to periodically update these plans. We have been working actually through the last decade to update those 2003 plans, and most of them, but not all of them, have been updated. And so our intent is, when they have all been updated, to come back to you as the Planning and Zoning Commission to complete the Pickens County Comprehensive Plan update to incorporate all of those neighborhood caucus master plan updates. And that, because we have a lot on our plates right now, is probably a year or two, a year and a half, 2 years out. So in the interim, we recognize that we need to address some actions that have been taken by the Board of County Commissioners in the last several years. The first being a declaration of a climate emergency made by the Board of County Commissioners. And in that resolution, there were several objectives identified by the board. One was to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by a certain date, by a certain percentage in date. Another was to make residential development net zero. And then the direction was to utilize growth management and the land use code to meet some of those climate action goals. Right, so then, as you know, the board appointed the Community Growth Advisory Committee, and they were asked to address those BOCC objectives relating specifically to climate and growth. And they did come up with a whole suite of recommendations, which you will be seeing over the next year and a half. One of which was to limit the final maximum floor area in the unincorporated Pickens County, unincorporated portion of Pickens County to 9,250 square feet. And then, so we will be updating the comprehensive plan to reflect that recommendation, to reflect the board's resolution and desire to take immediate action on climate. And then we're also going to include the updates that have been made to the caucus master plan since 2003, which also speak to house size limitations, primarily to address rural character and in some cases, climate action as well, right? So this map identifies those caucus areas and master plans that specified a recommendation for house size limitation, maximum final floor area cap of less than the cap that was 15,000 at the time. We've got the Emma Caucus, the Snowmass Capitol Creek Caucus, the Brush Creek Caucus, the Maroon Creek Caucus, the Upper Frying Pan Caucus. All of those master plans have made recommendations for a reduced house size cap. And then there is also a reduced house size cap in the Basalt urban growth boundary area. In addition, this map reflects the recommendation coming out of the Community Growth Advisory Committee for reduced house size in the remaining portions of the unincorporated Pickens County for 9,250 square feet. So I'm going to just go into the specific details of each of the sections of the plan that are being amended. The first is the common themes section, and this is within this section of the plan, the 2003 plan. There was back in 2003 a common theme to enact further limitations on residential floor area, and we are updating that existing section within the common themes to reflect not only the changes in the master plans that have been updated since then, their recommendations for specific reductions in limitations on floor area caps, but also to incorporate the Basalt urban growth boundary cap. Some of these caps have been codified already, and others you will be looking at tonight for codification. And then in addition to that, we'll be updating that section to include the Community Growth Advisory Committee floor area recommendation for limitation on house size, and specifically we'll be including a Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation within the comp plan to implement the limitation on the final maximum floor area in the unincorporated Pickens County to 9,250 square feet, except for those portions of the county that we just referred to, where there are more restrictive limitations in place, or will be in the future. Next. So then the second section that's being amended, also it exists. It is just, basically a summary of the adopted county land use master plans. And what we've done is tried to not only include all of the master plans that have been adopted, and to reference their current adoption dates. But we've also simplified this section in the existing plan. There's some detail, there's a fair bit of text related to a summary of each plan. And what we've done just to simplify the format is eliminate that detailed text and just reference the Planning and Zoning Commission resolutions for each plan, really for quick, easy reference. If someone wants to delve into those plans, they can now find them more easily and readily. And in the future, this will probably make it easier to update the comprehensive plan because we'll just be referencing resolutions rather than trying to summarize all the details of change. So, yeah, in summary, we're just proposing to update the Pickens County Comprehensive Plan, as I said, to make changes to the summary of adopted county plans section that I just reviewed, and to update just that portion of the common themes among the county plan section that addresses enactment of limitations on house size caps. And then again, we're proposing to amend the title of the plan to simplify it, to make it so it's not such a mouthful, to the Pickens County Comprehensive Plan. And so we are recommending that you tonight approve the resolution in your packet. We actually have a few changes that have been suggested by the county attorney. And so basically the changes, and we can pass this around. But before I go into the resolution, do you have any questions about any of the presentation, any of the particulars about the changes that are being proposed? And then anybody online?
Chelsea, does anyone have any questions so far?
I just want to confirm, because it wasn't clear in Ellen's presentation, the change to the comp plan, while it was it doesn't change the remainder of the county house size limit. It just changes or like codifies the master plans for the various caucus areas house size limits. Is that correct?
Well, there is a recommendation. There is a recommendation included to address the house size limitation for the unincorporated portions of the county outside of the caucus areas as well, right?
That's what yeah, okay. I thought it was written in there, but I just didn't hear you say it. So it's codifying the caucuses, and it's changing the remainder of Pickens County's house size cap to the 9,000 number. Yeah.
That is correct.
Got it. I just wanted to hear it out loud in the record. Thanks.
It is including the recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
Distinction is that the codification of the overlay zone districts is not something that the P&Z would be doing in the comprehensive plan amendment tonight. The house size recommendations stated in the various zoning overlay districts have already been recommended or implemented into the various caucus master plans. The recommendations in the next action that is on your agenda would make a recommendation on codifying those zoning changes for those overlays. The amendment from to the comp plan does not. It would be it's already been done in the various master plans, so that's the distinction.
Okay, that's the distinction. I just wanted to be clear because that will help guide public comment as well.
Okay. Thank you, Chelsea.
Thanks, Chelsea.
So,
Started where they fire actually where they put. So when we updated the Brush Creek master plan, it was because sprinklers are now introduced at 5,000 square feet. And the city of Aspen are now going to be 3,000. So just to throw that out there as well, it's not reflected in the plan. And I believe one of the areas that's not represented, because we're so focused on house size, is really threat of fire. That does come across in multiple plans, most specifically in Firewise neighborhood of Snowmass. So I know it's not necessarily relevant to house size, but they're interrelated. So it wasn't mentioned at all in any of the packet, which is kind of strange. Do all the exemptions that currently exist remain in force? So for example, whether we call it subgrade or below grade, accessory units, all of the table, we use two terms throughout this update to the comp plan. We use below grade and subgrade. I'm wondering, so we're heading towards a house cap conversation. Are all the exemptions still in place that are in force today?
There's nothing proposed to change the floor area definition. Whether, and I guess, I'm not sure about the comp plan language that maybe, have used different terms, but definitely that there's nothing proposed in the text amendments that changes how we calculate floor area today.
So, and then one more, and there's nothing really to address the onslaught of 213 revisited in terms of either ADUs or my second one, or multifamily, which seems to be coming down the pipe again. And when you read all of the caucus plans, again, I'll wear the Snowmass hat. Snowmass doesn't want multifamily, and Snowmass doesn't want ADUs as used by right. Is there anything we could be or should be doing today before the 2024 legislative session? Sorry to put you on the spot with an easy one.
Yeah, well,
I mean, I can,
yeah,
I
Caroline.
don't know who gets to jump in. on
Yeah,
that.
and then you can say, Jeffrey, it's not related to, but it is, because the way you presented each of the caucus plans, it does come across in each of them, including Emma, including Maroon Creek, that it's really not in their interest to continue to develop multifamily or ADUs outside of the UGB.
And if I can quickly address one part of that question, there are several aspects of the updated caucus master plans that are not included in this round of updating the overall comprehensive plan. We will come back to do a complete update to the comprehensive plan to identify all of the common themes that have emerged, including wildfire, including housing related. So you're right, this is not a complete update to the comprehensive plan to reflect all of those changes, but and I'm sure there'll be more before we get back to you on that.
And I would just say, I think the intention with the full growth committee recommendations is also looking at that legislative environment that is changing very rapidly. So, yes.
Great questions. Any others? Are we good? So,
I have a question.
okay, sorry.
Jeffrey, I'm finding it very hard to understand you. What did you say that had to do with Brush Creek and 3,000 square feet?
So when we updated when we updated via resolution, the update to the Brush Creek master plan, the logic for the 5750 house cap was based on a 4-inch pipe fed from Snowmass Village. So it was water restrictions. So currently, Pickens County's adopted IFC 2021. There's different versions in Aspen Fire Protection District versus Roaring Fork Rural. Roaring Fork is at 5,000 square feet. You must be sprinklered according to NFPA 13D. If you're in the city of Aspen, if you're in Aspen Fire Protection District, that in 2021 went down to 3,000 square feet. So I was pointing that out as what has changed since we adopted the Brush Creek master plan in 2022.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I had thought that the Brush Creek master plan, as I recall, their average house size was something like 2,600 square feet. And I thought that they had come in requesting lower than 5750 for maximum house size out there. I suppose I'm wrong. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay.
The conversation at the time was there was a series of parcels that were not built out.
Yes.
And that we're using the fact that there's a lack of water, a 4-inch pipe, which is an existing condition, plus now updates the 2021 building code.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, yes, ultimately, Suzanne, the plan recommendation did land on 5,750 square feet. Partially related to water capacity and other issues. Okay. So if there aren't any other questions, did everyone get a copy of a slightly revised resolution? Basically the change that's been made is the changes are highlighted in yellow on page 3. And essentially what we've done is dropped in some paragraphs to clearly reference the Community Growth Advisory Committee final maximum floor area recommendations, specifically what was recommended, and then also to state that as set forth in the exhibits attached, in Exhibit A attached to the resolution, that by this action, the Planning Commission is amending the comprehensive plan to include a recommendation that the county implement that final maximum floor area of 9,250 square feet. And the specifics that go with that. And then the changes in paragraph 16 really were just to clean up some references to the exhibits, which I think got a little bit turned around. So thanks to Rye for catching some of that. I'm sure Jeffrey or I saw you nodding your head would have caught those changes as well. But so those are the changes to the resolution proper, and then Exhibit A, which is the exhibit referring to the amendment to the common themes among the county plan section of the comprehensive plan, has a paragraph again that was dropped in to specifically reference the Pickens County final maximum floor area zoning overlay, limiting maximum floor area to 9,250 square feet. So those are the changes to the resolution before you. And unless you have questions, which I'd be glad to answer, I'll just complete my presentation by recommending approval of the resolution with changes as amended by these changes this evening.
So there's going to be public comment before we vote, right? Okay.
Yeah, Suzanne, open it up to public comment right now.
Okay.
And then we're gonna take public comment and then we'll have discussion. Then we'll probably open it up. I don't know if we're gonna take public comment all at once or if we want to do separate public comment for each one of the issues, or it's just a thought. 'Cause I mean, they are all tied together, but we can leave it open and then come back to it, I guess would be my suggestion.
I mean, I guess, right, I think for the public comment, for the comp plan, I think you're giving people the opportunity to comment on anything related to the comp plan within their time allotment. And then I think because that is a public hearing, I think we'll close the public hearing on that. I'll look to Rye. And then we can reopen for public comment later on the text amendments. But given that this is a notice public hearing, I think you want to open and close the public comment.
Okay, great. So do the commissioners have any more questions before I open public comment or comments? Good. All right. Okay, public comment.
So those aren't, we're not on those microphones.
That's right. Okay. We have 3 people who signed up for public comment on the comprehensive plan resolution. We have Joe Wells, Mona Newton, and then Glenn Horn. We can go in that order if that's okay. And we'll have 3 minutes right here. Three minutes per comment, right?
The same. The comprehensive plan?
Right, so we'll have,
So we can discuss that first.
It's a little confusing in terms of when the appropriate time to speak. If you have some concerns about the 92 15 Redstone, they're both in the comp plan and the others. I signed up for the code amendment, but I didn't know whether you wanted those comments now or later and just some clarification.
Yeah, I mean, both issues are intertwined, so I'll take all the comments and then if need be, when we get through the first item in the agenda, I'll leave public comment open and if people have additional comments that are only pertaining to the second item, then if we have time, then I think that would be appropriate. But for right now, we'll just take all.
but I think getting to that point, if you're more than welcome to do it for both.
Go ahead, Joe.
Is this,
No, you don't have to use the microphone. It's just the owl was picking you up and you're right in front of it, so you should be good.
oh, okay.
Sort of looks like an owl.
Joe Wells, former member of the Growth Advisory Committee. I was gonna use my limited time to comment on some specific sections of the master plan draft, but given the limited time, I want to comment on these changes. These haven't been published. We're seeing them for the first time, and from my standpoint, the changes are significant. So, the public was totally unaware of these changes prior to the meeting. So I have an objection to changes being made at the meeting itself. So I'll file that among my comments. I had planned to comment on 4 sections of the master plan. I'm just going to comment on one, which is on page 13 of your packet. Under the Community Growth Advisory Committee final report of recommendations, the language that is quoted there is final maximum floor area recommendation 8750 square feet in the unincorporated rural portion of the county and 9250 square feet in the UGB portions of unincorporated Pitkin County unless caucus or other floor area standards are more restrictive. Then that is followed by a series of asterisks, and the asterisks language is with recognition that house size is a powerful tool when used in conjunction with bold performance standards, mitigation/impact fees, and overlay and the other components of the report's recommendations. That's kind of the crux of the issue for some of us members of the committee. We anticipated that the recommendations would be considered as a whole and not separated out for separate adoption. So with that, I'm sure I've used my time, so I will yield.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
The chair, who's chairing today? Is that Zach?
Yeah.
I would, I think that comments from the committee are so important and in fact vital that if a committee member like Joe comes in, he shouldn't have to cut it down to 3 minutes.
Yeah, I have no problem with it. And especially, I think every person here who's giving public comment was on the growth committee. Is that correct? I see, yeah, so.
I'm the outlier.
Okay, all right, we have one that's not. So, I have no problem with that. And if we need to extend the time they could spend so much time on the committee, so much work, no problem with giving people how much time they need.
Thanks.
There we go. Yep.
So you want to come back up, Jim?
Yeah, I'll cover my other issues. They seem pale in comparison to what I was talking about. On page 14 of the packet, you're discussing the issue of the final maximum floor area, or staff is discussing final maximum floor area. And it includes a statement, GMQS allocations shall not be granted if floor area will exceed the final maximum floor area. You know, this is the first time we've actually had a discussion about this. This was never discussed among the committee. But in my view, the issue here is that there are GMQS allocations that have already been awarded, and the county has repeatedly stated in its various code amendments that those allocations, or particularly the allocations awarded prior to 2020, do not expire. That was reconfirmed as recently as when the county adopted code amendments to try to defend against the state bill that was recently adopted. So for the entire duration of the growth management system, the allocations up until 2020 do not expire. Some 50 years of having the system in place. On page 34 of the packet, you quote language from the Maroon Castle Creek Master Plan, which states that the analysis of existing land use and zoning in the area contained in the plan found that there was the potential for additional development in the planning area. I'm the coordinator for the Castle Creek Caucus, so I'm particularly sensitive to comments about the caucus. And the language goes on to read, residents of the area have expressed a willingness to accept this density if the homes are moderately sized or are located where they are not highly visible. So that's the language from the Maroon Castle Master Plan, current Maroon Castle Master Plan document. We're still hoping to come to you with an amendment. On page 48 of the packet, figure 1, which I think is the diagram on page 49 of the packet, the language is that it depicts one more theme that provides the foundation for the above 6 themes, and that is that there is a desire among residents for self-expression of their planning ideals and for local control of land use planning and regulation. It then goes on to read that the Woody Creek Caucus Master Plan states that local control of the planning process is essential. So sometimes those of us working on the caucus business feel that we're not given very much credit in the process. So I just call that to your attention. And those are my remarks. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Joe, I have one question. In the board, in the committee, the growth management committee, you guys did not discuss how the GMQS system would be affect this 9250, or how.
Well, we didn't discuss
2020, it would, like, how those allocations would change based on this new adopted.
Yeah, we just did not, in my recollection, and I'm only one of 26 members. In my recollection, we never had a discussion about allocations that had previously been awarded.
Okay.
So.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Mona, sorry, Mona Newton, and then Glenn Horn after Mona.
Hi, good evening. I'm Mona Newton, and I was, I guess, the former co-chair of the Community Growth Management Committee. And so while tonight you have this recommendation to limit the square footage to the 9250, I think it's an important consideration. And I think some of our colleagues have brought up some really good points, including Max. If you've read that letter, when you get a chance to read that letter, he's bringing some really good points up about how the TDR program will work and how some of the other issues related to that will be affected. However, I do think that it bears adopting, because with that in mind and thinking about the TDR program, I know that there haven't been a lot of TDRs purchased recently, but he brings up some very good points in his letter. I think the other points that you're considering tonight, the energy code and the electrification, or the exterior energy budget, excuse me, and the electrification, I think those are they're ready to adopt, and they're ready to go forward very quickly, because no matter what the house size is, electrifying, getting your home electric ready for the future is important as we move forward. Max noted that climate change is of the essence. I wholeheartedly agree with him, as I've spent the last couple of decades working on climate action. And so I think that and the exterior energy budget is super important to be adopted and acted on quickly. And I don't think that affects any of the other recommendations from the Growth Committee. There's a lot of things that are really intertwined and really need to be considered how one lever affects the other. But I think especially those need to be adopted. But I do feel that the 9250, if we can sort of stem the bleeding, because if you look at the white paper on house size and energy consumption, there's quite a jump in energy consumption as house size increases. And I think that's something for us to consider if we're going to meet the county's goals. And that was one of the reasons that the committee was appointed for to help the county meet the climate action goals that were set. So thank you.
Thank you, Mara.
Mona. Glenn Horn and then Gideon. Do you want to comment on the comp plan?
I'll just comment later.
Okay. Gideon, do you want to comment on the comp plan?
As long as I'll wait for the second one.
Okay, and then I just want to double check the folks that have joined us online. If you can raise your hands, that way we know that you would like to participate and comment. It doesn't look like. How do you raise your hand on the phone?
I believe it's *9. I think *6 is unmute, but try both of those. If the phone number wants to speak, try either *6 or *9, which would raise your hand.
Okay. Oh, yeah, would you like to? Please. Yeah, Cliff, come on up.
Your faces again. It really came tonight for some clarity. We struggled with house cap. There was a lot of votes. There was a lot of compromise. It was a big effort. And what we concluded is what it says in number 13. So 8750 outside the urban growth boundary. There was a meeting after all the votes were taken. It was a kind of a less formal board meeting where we were told that they wanted to have, they being staff wanted to, or at least that's what they were reporting to us, that They wanted one figure for the whole county. So in other words, UGB and outside UGB, one number. What I felt sandbagged by is I was on the lowest, I wanted a lower house cap, and somehow this thing got to be 9250. I had compromised way up to meet them at 8750, but that's where the majority of us voted. So I don't understand how you now have before you 9250 for the whole county. And that I'm not entirely thrilled with, as you might imagine. So I feel like I've been sandbagged a little bit. And I wanted to bring that to your attention.
Thanks, Cliff. I have a question for you. How, when it went from 8750 to 9250, right? Was that did the board vote? Or was that multiple meetings, or how did that process? How did that 500 square feet get?
It happened after, we weren't dissolved because we're still not dissolved, but it was the last official meeting that we were discussing house caps and voting. I think it was, or the last two meetings where we went back and forth trying to compromise, and everybody did, and it wasn't an ugly series of meetings. But let's face it, the area we're talking about, the largest proportion of it, 90 or 95%, was getting a lower figure, 8750. Yes, TDRs play into this, but either figure, and especially with TDRs now possibly going to 500 per, increments of 500. I don't think it's quite as big a deal one way or another where this ends up. So for it to be 8750, which would be the 2,500 on top of the 5750. I just, as Mona said, bigger the house, the more pollution, the more energy it uses, the more people it needs to service. And I don't really believe anybody needs a house that big, 9250. I frankly don't think people need 8750, but that was the compromise I agreed to.
Was the growth committee board asked for a unanimous number?
No, well, we never had a unanimous number for, we had, I don't really recall the exact number of votes, but I'd say about 60% voted for this, no?
No, I'm looking at you that I couldn't help you with what the,
Yeah.
I just remember there were a lot of votes.
A lot of
That's
this.
part I remember.
Yeah, I mean, the majority wanted that was the compromise that was made, was 9250 would be in the UGB. Okay. It's going to be anywhere. I prefer it there, but. Yeah.
Committee.
You're welcome.
Could I make a comment following Cliff's comments, please?
Yeah.
I, along with Chelsea and Joe, attended all of those meetings. And I remember it as Cliff is telling us it went. And Cliff is a good example of people who had to do a lot of compromising up. As I've mentioned before, I think to you all and to the Board of County Commissioners, it was the most civil, hardworking group I've ever, and creative group I have ever seen meet in the county. And so I could certainly go along with, when recently, Suzanne, stop me if I'm wrong about this, but recently, before the Board of County Commissioners, Michael Miracle answered, and he was the chair of the growth committee. He answered the question about going along with this compromise, going to 9250. And I think that he said that it was the staff and Michael who met and came up with the compromise of 9250. Do you recall that? It doesn't really matter. But anyway, Michael, speaking on behalf of the committee, and I'm sure trying to do his his best, using his good brain, agreed with the 9250 because it was only a few hundred feet larger. But I lean toward what Cliff is saying, because I saw how people like Cliff had to sweat it out through some of those things. So anyway, that's where I stand.
I was a member of that committee as well. I missed the September meeting when the discussion went from 8750 to 9250. I was the email chain that went on, and from what I understand happened is that when the recommendation from staff or from the county that said, let's piecemeal it, let's take the square footage number out and do that quickly because the rest is going to take 18 months to 2 years. Let's pull the square footage out. There was concern amongst the committee, as is discussed in the letters we got from Max and everybody, that it's not the whole package. And so in order to get the committee behind pulling the square footage out and promoting it earlier in the process, now as opposed to in the next 18 months, 9250 was the number that the committee agreed on to present at this interim stage to raise the whole county to 9250. That's the way I understand the conversation.
Voting on that?
It wasn't a vote.
It wasn't a vote. It seemed like it was an email conversation.
Right.
That's my understanding of how it began with 9250. I was on the 8750 side or less as well.
And I just want to clarify, and Doug, thank you, everyone. I want to be very clear that the September meeting and how you have a 9250 amendment before you today is not representative of consensus from the committee. The committee consensus is 8750 and 9250 in the UGB. The 9250 that is before you today was members voiced their feedback on it. It is not representative of consensus, and that is what the board, based on that feedback, asked staff to bring forward to you today. So I want to be sure to acknowledge that the hard fought compromise and what is before you today is based on board direction, is not a change of kind of where the committee itself landed. So I just want to get that clarification.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, can I change my mind and speak now?
Please.
And the reason I wanted to speak now is because of this whole issue of piecemealing and not adopting it all at once. So for the record, my name is Gideon Kaufman. I made some notes because I know I have 3 minutes. I'm not part of the committee. I've been dealing with Pitkin County land use for over 45 years. One thing I've learned about the code is how it's interconnected and have different sections work together and need to be in sync. Much of like a domino effect. When you have one section and it doesn't jive with the other section, it sort of falls over. They're linked together. You don't adopt a major change, such as a countywide FAR limit in a vacuum. It has ripple effects, and this will be creating hundreds of new non-conforming structures. Unfortunately, the non-conforming section of the code has needed significant work for a long time. Anyone who works with the code, land planners, attorneys, architects, and even your ComDev staff will tell you it really needs to be revised, and there's been talk of that for a long time. These deficiencies are compounded in light of this proposed major FAR change that will impact hundreds of new structures. Many of the Growth Committee expressed the same concern. Non-conforming status has significant ramifications, including the ability to finance, ability to repair, replace, and even make small changes that require planning director sign-off. There are also other stigmas associated with non-conformity, especially if the section of the code does not directly address these issues. I understand the desire to adopt part of the code changes recommendations because it takes a long time to adopt all of them. But the FAR section is one I know that the BOCC would like to implement, but it should be done correctly. Given the strong linkage between the non-conforming section of the code and the FAR section, these two at least should be done in sync. This has been a long, thorough process, well thought out. And I don't believe a small delay it would take to adopt these two sections together would be a problem, and it could do it correctly. I believe it would be in keeping with the thorough and thoughtful approach that you have taken up till now. There are some sections that can be separated, but sections such as the non-conforming section, which have such a strong implementation, given the new FAR, I think that needs to be brought together with the FAR and not put off for months or years, which will have serious implications on people. I'm not arguing against the FAR. I just think it needs to be done with at least this particular section that are linked and really have an impact on a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So I think for right now, I'm gonna close public comment and then I'm gonna reopen it, or I just keep it open. But I guess we'll just begin with commissioner comments and discussion about the first resolution. Anybody has any? Go ahead, Ellen.
And after commissioners have had a chance to weigh in again, if you'd like me to respond to a couple of those comments that were made, I'd be glad to.
Maybe she do that. Before I'd like to hear her comments before I comment.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, and Ryan might want to weigh in on this one, but to Joe Wells's comment about the new sections being dropped into the resolution and the exhibit A to the resolution, I think these are really just clarifications. I don't think it's new information that's being introduced. It was just to reiterate what has already been presented. Ryan may want to weigh in on that. I understand Joe's concern that, hey, this is a different draft than the public has seen, but I don't think that the changes are significant in terms of content. And then to the, and Ryan, I don't know if you want to.
I'm happy to if the board would like me to.
Please.
So assuming that this meeting was properly noticed, which I don't have any reason to believe that it wasn't, the function of this board is to plan. Frankly, you could consider changes to this tonight if it was included as a motion made by one of you all. To reduce floor area, to increase floor area, to make other changes to the comp plan. As long as you don't stray too far from what was noticed as far as a discussion on limiting house size in the county, that's exactly what you're doing here. As the board makes a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, that's when the limitation on making changes starts to get blocked further in. So if this board makes a recommendation on house size, and that goes up to the Board of County Commissioners. If the Board of County Commissioners then desire to make an additional change back, it would be necessary to bring that change back to this body to consider it in the planning perspective. So I'll leave that for now.
Thank you, Ryan.
And then if I may, the comment, I think it was Joe Wells, made about again, in exhibit A, which is the amendment to the common theme section of the comprehensive plan. He referenced the note that's on page 4, referring to final maximum floor area. That is a definition that exists in the land use code today. And it's conceivable, I think, I don't know if that definition is going to be amended to reflect recent action or not, but I think what might be simplest here, the intent was really just to define the term final maximum floor area. And I think if that second sentence referring to growth management is problematic, the first sentence alone, which says final maximum floor area, means the largest amount of gross floor area that may be constructed on the lot or parcel pursuant to land use code table 5.1-1 could stand alone as clarifying what that term means. I don't know, again, Ryan, I don't know if you'd like to add to that or not?
I don't think so. I think that definition was pulled right out of the
Directly.
definition section of the land use chart.
So that the intent was to clarify there and provide a definition really to define the term for the general public primarily. And then the only other comment I'll add is that Gideon's comments about looking at the nonconformities section at the same time we look at that section concurrently with the dimensional standards limitations being proposed. I think that is more appropriate for the discussion that's coming up in your next item. I think the comprehensive plans, remember, these are advisory documents. They're not regulatory, and so they are advisory only. And so I don't think it would be so. I just want to clarify that this is not a regulatory document, but that may be something that we want to look at as part of the codification that's proposed. Again, anything?
I'd say only other clarification to, I guess, Mona's comments were talking about the energy budget and the electric ready provisions. Since those are building and energy code provisions, they are not coming to the P and D. So those will be going straight to the BOCC for consideration. And just for those who are keeping track, there'll be a work session with the board next Tuesday, the 24th, to start to talk about that and get direction from the board about what we may move forward with code amendments on that front. But again, those are building code amendments, so they won't come in front of the P&Z.
And then I guess I do have one more and then I'll stop. But Joe Wells also noted that in the comprehensive plan amendments, we do include the reference that the Community Growth Advisory Committee made to incorporating a whole suite of recommendations. And I think, we'll just continue to reiterate the fact that this is an action we can take, recognizing that whole suite of recommendations has been made, and we do intend, the board has given us direction to move forward with those. They are complex. They will require a lot of work, analysis, perhaps some more data. And we will absolutely be bringing the whole suite back to you to the extent that it makes sense over the next 18 to 24 months. This is simply an action that we can take in here and now to address the climate emergency that the board has made very clear and has directed us to move forward on. So just to acknowledge that is absolutely an accurate portrayal of what was recommended, but that we do intend to absolutely move forward with those as a suite moving. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Commissioner comments? Discussion?
Yes, I have a question. Suzanne or Ellen, what about it? I think that some of the reasons, a big reason that we're having to go step by step by step is because of staff time availability and the possibility or impossibility of getting things done sooner than a year or two, year and a half or two. What did you think about Gideon's comments about joining the two, those two issues and getting them through at the same time?
So Suzanne, I think we can talk about that, but I would prefer to talk about it when we're talking about the land use code amendments as opposed to the comp plan piece. Again, the comprehensive plan is looking at the floor area maximums and the caucus area maximums. That's starting to delve much deeper into the code stuff, and happy to have that conversation, but I think it would be more appropriate to bring that up as part of discussing the actual text amendments. Since that's not something that would would show up in the comp plan specifically.
What I am fearful of is that if I vote on, say, if we started dealing with the house size issue during this portion of the meeting, and I vote in one direction, that then when I get to the next, we get to the next item, I wouldn't be able to, I've already ruled myself out. Does that make
I don't
sense?
think the action you take on the comp plan amendment ties your hands in any way about how you vote on the actual then text amendments. And, you know, I mean, the amendments to the code are the very specific, you know, language amendments going forward. And again, at that point, again, I think, right, that's where you would have a conversation about, I might be willing to do this, but I agree with Gideon and I think there should be some additional language included. I mean, I think at that point, you know, we're delving much more into the language of the code and having that discussion. So, but I guess to your point, I don't think any action you take on the comp plan, I'm looking at Ryan, he's shaking his head too. So, you know, then, you know, ties your hands for what action you take on the code amendments.
Is Rye shaking his head or nodding his head? Is he disagreeing with you?
Sorry, you can't see it.
Suzanne, if for instance, nothing you do on the comp plan would prevent you from making an affirmative or negative recommendation on any other aspects that are in front of the commission tonight.
Okay,
So
thank you. That's all I need. Thanks. Perfect.
And if I may, I'd only add that the comprehensive plan is also forwarding updates to the caucus master plans, which also include recommendations just specific to a reduction in the house size cap. And so, you know, it's really a focused discussion. It doesn't go into the detail of how, you know, the hows and whys and the adjuncts that go along with that recommendation. And it is a recommendation only in an advisory document that can then be carried forward into the code amendments, as Suzanne said, which are ultimately will move into some more detail.
Yeah, so my thought is that we can start our discussion on the comp plan right now, because that's a good thermometer or gauge of, because we can't get past that, then the code amendments, or if we can't get a, you know, understanding of how everyone feels on the comp plan, then we're not gonna make it to the code amendments. So how does that sound?
Yeah.
Good.
That's good.
Sorry. Yeah.
I feel that, although it would be ideal to do everything at one time, when we know the interconnected of everything, the interconnection of all these items, no land use code doesn't have contradictions. It's true in the city, it's true in the county. You will always be able to find something that contradicts something else in the plan. I would hate to see this first part be held up by that, especially since we are going to go through the amendments, and then that would give us an avenue to address making the various elements of this very carefully thought out recommendation system that the Growth Advisory Committee presented to us, which we all found extremely impressive for its thoroughness and the logic with which the recommendations were based on real data. So I would really like to see this move forward and get into more of the details in the second discussion.
Great, thank you.
My questions were addressed pretty much directly by Ellen, and I was wondering about a bunch of things that Joe had brought up. My other question, from what Joe said, is allocations previously awarded. What is an allocation? Is that a additional square footage that's been allocated? Is it a vested right? What's an allocation? What's an allocation?
So allocation in our, it's a growth management allotment, so, or allocation for floor area. I mean, there's either a new development right or a floor area allotment. I mean, I think in either of those circumstances, there would be a conversation, a discussion about how this applies to allotments that were previously granted. That's kind of where Joe was heading more with that, I think, conversation. And, you know, right, that gets into the whole, you know, right,
That's gonna be in the second half. of the
It's more, yeah,
conversation.
related to the text amendments.
And I just wanted to point out that the last commissioner meeting, we did the 114 Maroon Drive application, and that was a GMQS floor area allocation, 566 square feet. So maybe that orients you.
And those allocations have vested rights. There's a time period for those, or they're saying anything before prior to 2020 is unlimited.
The code was amended in 2020 to change some of the allotment language. And so it was written into the code at that time that allotments granted prior to that did not expire. Allotments granted after that time have 5 years to be utilized. Again, that expiration is not a vested right necessarily, or it's not a vested right. The site-specific development plan, for Nicole's example, you saw a full site plan that went along with the use of that allotment. The site plan is what vests. But that's the language from the code does say anything granted prior to 2020 doesn't expire.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm ready for a resolution.
All right, so anyone would like to make a?
Do you want to see it? I don't see any hands online, but
Joe, Chelsea, Suzanne, right now?
I guess my only kind of comment or question is this, this proposed resolution for amending the comp plan isn't really that substantive, except for retitling common themes related to house size it already exists elsewhere. So I guess you're consolidating it to make it a more efficient index for those parties who refer to the plan on a regular basis as a reference tool, but otherwise the substantive aspect is that attachment A, last paragraph of the last page. And that's the one that's stirred up the most controversy among the committee members. And based on the committee members' feedback, they don't support it. And the committee is the reason we're here, and they're tonight to talk about the committee's feedback as a whole. So I don't find myself in support of something with such strong pushback from the members of the committee who worked so hard on it. So to make it a cohesive body of recommendations rather than a singular, even people in favor of a floor cap or floor area cap and limitations on square footage, like Cliff, aren't in favor of the number proposed in this exhibit. So both sides of the fence, even those supporting reduction in house size, don't support this particular amendment in its detail. So I don't see a strong, other than from the BOCC recommending that they implement emergency changes. And I don't feel like any community members are here to talk about the emergency, other than those committee members who took additional time. And I thank you for your additional time as committee members and other citizens tonight. So I won't vote in favor of amending the comp plan just to make it an easy reference material and insert this floor cap.
So do you have any recommendations on how we should proceed, or what's your?
I'll vote, I won't vote in favor of the resolution as written. And I don't feel like it needs to pass anyway, because it's, in my reading of it, mostly clerical to make it an easier reference tool. It's like it's disguising the floor area substance with a bunch of other unobjectionable reference material rearrangement. So no.
Could you vote for it if it had said 8250?
No, because like all of the letters that we've received from the committee members and communications and general feedback from the committee members, they want the amendments to the land use code and the comp plan to be comprehensive because all the issues are so intertwined. So no.
Well, how do we find our way out of that?
We wait 18 months until there's a more cohesive body of complete recommendations that reflect the intent of the committee that worked for 10 months to create a well-written report that has, 10 different issues that are all interwoven. And we wait for that combined land use code amendment package rather than singling out just this one thing that has a domino effect.
So I could not go along with that. Waiting.
Well, it's been over 2 years since we decided not to push through a rushed land use code amendment plan back in March of 2020. Staff tried to change the GMQS exemptions then at the BOCC's recommendation, and we stopped at the P&Z level and we formed the committee. And it took a long time for the county to form the committee. It took a long time for the committee to come up with their cohesive recommendations in an organized fashion. And I don't see there being any strong repercussions at the community level, the county level, for patiently waiting for this job to get done right. And so we create a body of work that lasts another 20 years.
Well, obviously, you and I disagree with one another, because I think the fact that it took a long time to get to this point does not justify taking a longer time to finally move forward. I would love to see it all done at once, but I see great dangers in that. So see what other people are thinking about it.
So how about we try this? Would anyone like to make a motion?
Joe's got a hand up.
Oh, Joe, go ahead. Oh,
There's no sound.
Oh, is he?
Is he on the phone?
Oh, maybe he's,
might be.
hang on, Joe. Are you a 948 number, Joe?
Maybe a parent.
Oh, is he? There he is.
But he looks like he's trying to use his phone, so I was wondering if that's that phone number.
It looks like that person is allowed to talk.
Can you move it up his face so we can see? Oh, he's on the phone. Yes, he's telling us he's on the phone.
What if it's star six?
So well, go ahead and try pressing *6 on your phone and then give us another test.
Want to type it into the.
Yeah.
Because he may not see there.
Oh, sure. Can I do that in the?
Oh, we heard that, Joe. Give us a test. No, we're not hearing you. Just try to remove your permissions to talk and allow you to talk again. Joe, if you can press *9 to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Now we can.
Oh, then we lost you.
Well, I'm trying to figure out whether my phone is working or whether my speaker is working.
We can hear you.
Now
over
you
the
currently
phone.
have me on 2. Hang on.
We can, yeah, there's a little reverb, so they're probably both working, but we can hear you.
Okay, can you hear me still?
Yes.
Can you hear me still? Okay, thanks. So I guess I think this is getting rushed through. I would agree with what Chelsea said, that first of all, we're not even in agreement as to whether it's, the UGV cap, which was supposed to only be in the UGB, or it's the, something in the middle. And I think that there are a lot of implications that we need to think through in terms of creating a bunch of non-conforming structures. I don't really think it's appropriate to pass a house size cap as a rule of general applicability. I know that, the state statute seems to indicate that if it's, an emergency or whatever, but I don't think that we should adopt a house size cap as a rule of general applicability. It should be the same way we've done other things. In other words, that if you have a GMQS allotment that's, still in effect, if you have, TDRs that you are going to land on your property, or if you're in the approval process, that those ought to be, ought to go forward, because that's how, everyone was anticipating this would happen. I also agree that, all of these, first of all, the house size cap, and I sat through all that, 9 or 10 months of meetings, never made a comment because we weren't supposed to make comments, although others did. I think they are, all of this was really tied together. And the one that we had the least consensus on was house size cap. So to pull that one out and adopt all of this, adopt the house size cap without going through all the other items that were tied in, I think it's premature, frankly. And I also do have some concerns about creating so many non-conforming structures in the county. I'm not sure what the plan is for the non-conforming provisions of the code. Currently, I believe that you are allowed, if you're non-conforming as to size, you're allowed to at least rebuild what you have already if there's voluntary demolition or a casualty loss. But that could be easily changed in the future. And then we would end up with something similar to what the city has, which I believe says if you, whatever, the fire burns down your house or you voluntarily demolish it, that you have to build it back to whatever the, limitations are. So I think that creates a lot of issues with owners, with lenders and so on. So, I would like to see, that we do this in a more, at least in my view, reasoned approach, following what the committee wanted, which was the committee, was supposed to be the group that we were going to take our direction from. And I think a lot of the people that have weighed in today who are on the committee have, likewise said, well, why are we adopting the one thing that we really didn't have a full consensus on and not doing the other stuff? Anyway, so that's kind of my 2 cents worth on that topic. And thanks for the time.
Thanks, Joe.
I guess I should speak up as a member of the committee, a voting member of the committee, went to all the meetings. I did miss the September meeting, which I don't know whether it was a real meeting or whatever, which is when this interim square footage plan came to fruition, I believe. So from what I have read the letters from various people that have written in. I've also spoken to committee members that are supporting the interim step. So I feel like I can speak with them. I think Mona and Michael both spoke very eloquently to the committee when we talked about this interim step. And my understanding is the committee had a consensus that we could proceed with this interim step so that something is going on. So there is some progress, and we're not waiting. I think that Gideon's comments about non-conforming structures is well reasoned. I don't understand. It's a good comment. I can't comment about the complications that's going to create for the county, for the staff. So I'm of the opinion that an interim step is the only way to move forward, because it'll take forever to get the whole thing through. And I think I said in that email chain, to wait for perfection, is stopping progress. And so I'm of the opinion that making the interim step is a way to continue the progress, to continue the process, and to get something happen on paper.
I agree with you, Doug.
Me too.
Okay, yeah. I have concerns about the non-conforming structure as well. And I have some, after reading the white paper that the committee came with, I have some more questions about the TDR situation and how that's going to affect TDRs in the future in the TDR market and a lot of issues like that, but I've spoken myself with 3 or 4 members of the committee, and I didn't really get the impression that there was a lot of disagreement or that there was a lot of like extremely opposite views on what they're bringing to the table. So also the end. So I'm interested in, seeing if we can move forward and seeing if we can, I guess right now, if someone wants to just make a motion to adopt first resolution, and then we'll see where we can go from there. That might be my thought, but that's all I have. Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the resolution of Pickens County Planning and Zoning Commission adopting amendments to the common themes among county plans and summary of county adopted plans section Pickens County Comprehensive Plan and certifying the plan to the Board of County Commissioners of Pickens County, Colorado, with updates to in the recital for paragraph 13, 14, and 16 as presented.
Second by Yasmin, and then Doug. Should we roll call or?
Usually we'd open up for, comment from the board.
Go ahead. Comment?
I don't have any further comment.
Joe? Chelsea?
Jeffrey, were you gonna discuss any of this resolution before you make a motion, or did you have any feedback?
Yeah, I mean, I have some questions, about that. I have some comments, but I'm gonna make them when we start dealing with the land use agreements is what I'm gonna do.
Is there a motion on the floor now? Did
There
someone,
is.
did Jeffrey make a motion?
Yep, and Yasmin seconded.
Oh, okay.
Yep. We're gonna do a roll call here. All right, Jeff.
It was difficult to hear the motion. Jeffrey was talking way too fast.
Okay, here, Jeff, will you move your microphone?
It's not the microphone,
It's
it's just
not.
you'll just have to
It's the
speak
pickup,
louder to
okay.
make sure the owl.
All right.
picks you up. You may just need to be louder. Are you having trouble hearing other people or is it just?
Jeffrey seems hoarse.
He's pretty sure.
I'm just trying to single you out, Jeff. Be louder.
At this point, I would like to make a
You
resolution.
running for office now?
As per attachment A that was presented in front of us, I'd like to make a resolution of Pickens County Planning and Zoning Commission adopting amendments to the common themes among county plans and summary of county adopted plans section of the Pickens County Comprehensive Plan and certifying the plan to the Board of County Commissioners of Pickens County, Colorado, with updates as presented to us today, paragraph 13, paragraph 14, and paragraph 16, highlighted in yellow in the recitals presented to us today.
And Zach, if I might, because I was realizing, right, we have a paper version of amendments here and everybody online doesn't have those, so I can read those into the out loud if you'd like, so. So number 13 that was added to the resolution states, with regard to final maximum floor area, the Community Growth Advisory Committee final report of recommendations includes a recommendation that Pickens County codify a final maximum floor area.
Thank you.
Oh, there we go. Somebody put it up.
Yeah.
That's better than me reading.
Yeah, that's better.
Thank you,
right there.
Hannah.
Yep.
Is that okay? Can everybody see that? So I don't have to read to you.
Yes, we can see that on the screen here.
So we'll give everybody a second to read that.
Okay.
So then just scroll, I guess, Hannah. So the changes to number 16, we're just cleaning up references to exhibits, I believe. So there was nothing substantive there. And
Just a
then,
switch of A and B.
okay. And then the additional change to the language we'll pull up as well.
In exhibit A.
It's on my screen, it's not sharing on your screen, sorry. There we go.
That's the change to exhibit A. To the resolution.
In addition.
So this addition to our packet isn't in the links that we have either, so this you're just showing us now for the first time. It's not in the links I had for the packet prior to the meeting for the resolution.
That's correct, and we did not get this sent out to you all who are online tonight. We brought copies in, so that's why we're showing it now.
And does this meet public hearing notice requirements to change the resolution on the eve of the meeting?
Yes, I believe that the meeting was properly noticed and that the changes are being discussed right now by the board. The language could be changed from this to something different if the P and Z wanted to, so I do believe it meets a noticing requirement.
Well, before you go through the roll call, I'm not going to vote in favor of the motion Jeffrey's put on the floor. I'm not sure whether it'll carry, but I would take this out and approve it without these new additions from tonight. If you wanted to update the links to the names of the caucus floor caps in the comp plan, that's fine, but this is not okay with me.
Kelsey, do you want to make a motion to remove this new language? And then, I mean, what's your,
I can't do that when there's a different motion on the floor, but I don't think, but I'm just telling you, I don't think we should include this final maximum floor area zoning overlay in the proposed resolution for tonight.
well, so let's do the roll call. And then we'll see where we're at and then we'll go from there. Okay. All right, roll call vote. I'll start, Jasmine?
Yes.
Yes. Doug?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Joe?
No.
Chelsea?
No,
Okay, and I vote yes. So,
You guys mind if we take a senatorial 5?
yeah, we're gonna take a 5-minute break. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just unmuted us to Zoom, so.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, Tuesday, October 17th, Pickens County Commission regular meeting. We are reconvening after a short break. And just wanted to go through, it is currently 6:52. And I just wanted to make sure all the members are okay with staying till whenever this gets done. I know some of us are in different time zones. Chelsea, Joe, I just wanted to check in and see how you guys are in different time zones and all that, and how much later you can stay with us.
Yeah, I'm in Eastern time zone, so I have to go at 10 because I have to catch a flight at 8 a.m. out of Norfolk tomorrow morning. So I would like to start packing within, 9 hours of my flight.
Well, we'll see what we can do.
So 8 o'clock our time.
Yep, perfect. All right.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Did you just decide about a time that that's a hard stop?
Yeah, well, Chelsea is in an East Coast time zone, so she has about another hour that she can stay with us. Just discussing that.
Okay.
You don't need me for a quorum, so I'll stay on as long as I can to hear public opinion and feedback from the audience and the commissioners, but I apologize, I have to go at 10 p.m. my time.
No problem. Okay.
I'm supposed to be taking all of my grown grandchildren who are here from across the country out to dinner tonight. And they're just now leaving without me, but that's by my choice.
Well, thank you. I guess, well, then let's get started.
Okay. So I'm going to run through presentation, but I'll be quick because I think you all get the gist of where we're at. But this is the portion where we are talking about amending the code and rezonings to accomplish the overlays we're talking about, and as well as the 9250 amendment. So we're proposing to create 4 overlay zone districts: Brush Creek to do the 5750 limit, Emma, the 8250 limit, which is already codified in the code, but there was never an overlay zone district created. Capitol Creek and Lower Snowmass Creek, the 5750 limit, and the Basalt Urban Growth Boundary at 5750, which again, similar to Emma, is in the code today, but was never codified as an overlay. So we were, part of it is creating those overlays. So these, again, we'll just go quickly through these. Again, we're trying to just show you that the basis for these in the various master plans, Brush Creek. And then the next slide is the map that goes along with this. All this is in your packet. So again, I'm just gonna run through these quickly. That shows you the area. Emma, again, the 8250 limit came out of their master plan, was codified, and now we're just creating that overlay. The Emma area shown on this map. Valleys of Capitol Creek and Lower Snowmass Creek. This was a more recent master plan amendment where they asked to do the 5750 limit. Again, showing their area. And then the last one is Basalt Urban Growth Boundary. Maybe show the map on that one, since they're just little pieces, which it's hard for you to see the hatched areas that are in the unincorporated area of Pitkin County, but within Basalt Urban Growth Boundary. And those are the areas that are affected by the 5750, again, which has been in the code, but not in an overlay. So just to walk you through understanding, we have to create text in the land use code to speak to these overlays. And then we also rezone these areas to have that overlay on top of their underlying zone district. So if you're AR10 today, you would end up having the Basalt Urban Growth Boundary overlay laid on top of that. And that's what affects the house size limit for those caucus areas. So a lot of that text that's in your packet is creating those overlays and then the rezoning piece for those areas. So I feel like that's pretty straightforward as a part of this, but that is a part of the resolution that's in front of you. This is a map that's in the code today that really is just a cleanup. This is a code amendment to update the maps for the Basalt urban growth boundary and the city of Aspen urban growth boundary. That again, from when the code was done in 2006, these are just updates. So then the next conversation obviously is about the 92 square foot final maximum floor area. Again, I think we've got some slides that walk through the basis of this. I think you're all pretty familiar with this stuff now, so we'll just kind of flip through those, trying to respond to the climate emergency, the growth committee recommendations, and the BOCC direction to bring forward the 9250 limitation for your consideration. Again, I think we've had a lot of conversation about all of that. So, this would apply all areas within unincorporated Pitkin County, unless there's obviously more restrictive areas. We've got rural remote at 1,000 square feet, TR1, TR2. There are areas that have a floor area ratio that's going to limit them to less than that anyway. And then all of these overlay zone districts that we're talking about. So the two that exist in the code already are Maroon Creek and the Frying Pan already have overlays in place. These are the actual sections of the code that are being amended to accomplish the 9250 amendments. Again, I wasn't going to walk through all of these, but in very simple terms, the effort was to change where the number 15,000 square feet showed up to 9,250. And then to acknowledge those overlay zone districts that have more restrictive limitations. So that's basically where the code amendments show up, and that's all in part of, in your resolution, showing those very specific red line code amendments. What else? So again, this map you saw earlier, this is just showing the overlay areas as well as the 9250 and where it would apply. There are some exceptions in the fine print down there. There are some areas where the county in the past has legal agreements with certain areas like Star Mesa, the preserve, the other one I'm missing, something else, again, that Eagle Ponds have specific maximum floor area limitations that are legal agreements that we would stand. So those would be areas that could exceed that limit up to what they were allowed.
And do those legal agreements stand in perpetuity?
We have basically codified those in chapter 6 of the code, where we talk about those areas are exempt from growth management up to that amount. And in those cases, those amounts are 11,000 and 12,000 something and 15,000 square feet in Star Mesa. So that is specified in the code already. And we would be specifying that they would not be subject to this limitation.
That was actually a question I had, because now that we're on it, was there any discussion in the growth committee about having square footage max exceptions for areas that have historically been designed and had large home sizes? And the areas that I'm thinking about I didn't even think of Star Mesa, but I was thinking just like Starwood, Owl Creek, Red Mountain. Was there any discussion about having areas like that were sort of historically and designed, that were designed to have larger house sizes?
I don't think their discussion delved into that kind of detail. I mean, again, we've talked before about their recommendations were kind of the broader, knowing that we would have to really delve into all of that going forward. So again, these exceptions we've called out are very specifically codified based on those agreements that had been previously.
Yeah, because some of these are just like HOAs, not even metro districts, and lie within different zoning districts that are
the
more
ones that
prohibitive.
I've just called out.
Yeah.
Those are, I mean, again, they were basically settlement agreements between the county and those properties in the past.
And so they aren't affected by this resolution.
Correct.
And that's Star Mesa, Eagle Pines.
Star Mesa, Eagle Pines, the preserve.
Preserve, okay.
Thank you. Let's see, so just another, that was just showing the existing zoning, we keep going. So then you have a resolution in front of you that has a very long which is basically adopting the code amendments as well as then the zoning amendments. And again, here it's creating the overlays, you know, amending text in the code. And then if you flip to the next slide. Oh, so you can just spread those around. These are just copies of the resolution that is in your packet. There are no changes to it, but a couple of people asked if they could have a paper copy. So if you could just put those around. But for those of you online, there are no changes proposed by staff at this time to the resolution that was in the packet. So the second piece of the resolution is, you know, recommending approval to the VOCC of the rezonings, which again is rezoning those areas with the overlays, Brush Creek, Emma, Capital Snowmass, the Basalt Urban Growth Boundary, and then the unincorporated areas of the county with the 9250 limit. So again, that was quick, but I think everybody got the lay of the land at this point. So happy to answer any of your questions on specifics and go from there.
Any questions for staff? Jeff?
Mine's minor, but, so you're gonna update 63070 since we just updated it last week? Sorry, a little more clarity, you know.
I'm really good with my code sections, but you kind of caught me off guard right
63070
there.
was just updated, I think, 2 weeks ago, which was the exemption for
Speaking
large
The
lots.
500 acre exemption. My understanding, and Rye will have to jump in because I wasn't at the meeting and he wrote the language, was that I think 15,000 square feet was already removed. You all are more up.
The way that I believe, or the way that the Planning and Zoning Commission shook out on the 500 acre GNQS exemption was that the exemption would apply to up to either the maximum final floor area in the county or the more restrictive zoning overlay that would potentially cover that. So
it sort of goes back to where Gideon and others have pointed to, which is, we updating 637 then today. Right, because this is more restrictive, then we have another piece of the code that still is 15,000.
If it no longer says 15,000 the way it was agreed, I guess that's the question is where you all ended up. If 15,000, my assumption was that 15,000 had already been removed and it referred to just the final maximum floor area, but.
I guess the BOCC hasn't approved the land use code text amendment yet, so technically 63070 has not been changed from 15,000 to, I believe we use the same definition, which is final maximum floor area or the more restrictive zone district overlay. So to the extent that we need to modify this motion or the resolution in front of the P&Z tonight to add 63070, then I guess suppose that's a great catch.
It's sort of, I mean, it's sort of going to get into question of, did we go all the way through it other than just look for the 15,000?
Right.
So I mean,
I did. I will just say, I did. To address the change from 15,000 to 9250, and I promise I didn't just do a search for 15,000 square feet, though that was one of the tools I used. But again, I guess Ryan, I haven't communicated enough about what you all agreed to at the last meeting and whether or not, if that's moving forward in a separate ordinance to the BOCC, if 15,000 was already removed from that language, we do not need to capture it here. But that's, we can.
Yeah, I guess I anticipated by using the definition of final maximum floor area that no matter what the board did, this board did, or the BOCC did with respect to final maximum floor area in the county, that the changes we made last week would be captured by that. So even if no change to house size took place, the language in the proposed code amendment would read maximum final floor area.
But yes, good question. That was somewhere buried in my notes.
I guess roll the tape forward. I just want BOCC seeing one that says 15 and then the next week they see one that's 15. And it just doesn't, just. But.
Yes, yeah, no, I understand.
Several of us have concerns about the, subjects that have been brought up by members of the audience, particularly the effects that these changes will have on TDRs and nonconformities. Is there a way in this resolution to include a recommendation that there are certain things that we think should be brought forward as priorities, such as a reexamination of those particular issues, or can this not be part of this resolution?
That certainly can be part of the resolution if it was made in a motion to approve or deny the resolution. If there is a statement from the Planning and Zoning Commission that they want it to be added to the resolution, that would be made by an amendment by whomever made the motion at the time.
Thank you.
And just, I mean, Jasmine, I think to maybe respond a little bit more to that. I mean, I think the question of TDRs and, you know, the recommendations coming out of the growth committee are, you know, very far reaching at that. You know, I mean, again, it's rethinking the whole TDR program. You know, and that's why that wasn't something we were trying to touch now, knowing that, you know, again, it's very interconnected with a lot of the pieces. I think, you know, some of the comments you've heard tonight about nonconformities is a discrete section of the land use code that speaks to that. So I think, you know, if we're looking now for the things we can do in a simple manner, you know, without really starting to touch on, you know, affecting the whole TDR program or something like that, you know, to look at the non-conforming section of the code is right, maybe something that does make, you know, more sense that we could do as a part, you know, along with this now versus waiting for the rest of the recommendations and how all of that relates.
So staff would find it okay to, or would not think it's a real problem to recommend that we look at the nonconformities more quickly because it's a more discrete part of the code.
I think, yeah.
Okay.
Suzanne, Chelsea, Joe?
I don't have questions or comments at this time.
And I guess we can take a public comment about this.
Sure.
Second phase of amendments we're looking at.
Okay. Opening the public hearing, okay. Everyone here would like to comment on the code amendment piece. Should we do Joe Wells and then Cliff?
Glenn, are you gonna speak?
Do you want Glenn to go first?
Yeah, because it might pare down some of my comments, so if he doesn't mind going ahead.
All right.
Okay, so we'll do Glenn and then Joe. And do you want me to keep time or just keep it? Okay, thank you.
I have two sets of comments. One, as a planner representing several clients, and then some comments that are more related to my role as a growth committee member. First, I would ask that the Planning Commission consider making a recommendation about let's say the rules of construction for the new floor area limits there, where it would say that if you have a vested property right and you're within your vested property rights term, that you could continue with a project based upon the floor area limit that was established for the property as part of your vested property right. Or in the alternative, if you have an application in that's been deemed complete and is in the review process, that you could continue pursuing the approvals in the application, even though it may exceed the new floor area limit of 9,250. So I think it's a matter of fairness. If someone has been approved with a house that's larger than 9,250 and they're vested, they could continue during their vested property rights term to build to the house size that was approved for the project. Likewise, if you have an application in for a 10,000 square foot house and it's been deemed complete, you could continue in the process. So I would ask that you consider that as a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners with respect to pipeline projects. Then with respect to, I do have a comment, and this has to do with Star Mesa, and this is on Exhibit E, that little box you're talking about, Suzanne, the note. It says the following board approved subdivisions are exempt from the zoning changes to the maximum floor area. And it lists Meadowood, Star Mesa, Eagle Pines, and the Preserve. Star Mesa is not a county approved subdivision. So I would just ask that that be cleaned up, because the intent here is that Star Mesa could continue to be developed, the lots of the parcels up there to the maximum house size in those agreements. But this is just a technical clarification. And then comments with regard to my role as a growth committee member. This was something we talked about several times in the growth committee. There's a recommendation in the report about cleaning up the non-conforming use section of the code. And as Suzanne said, and as Jasmine was talking about, the non-conforming structure section of the code is pretty discrete. It's not all interrelated. I think I would ask the Planning Commission make a recommendation that the staff take on the project of redoing the non-conforming structure section prior to the entire code rewrite, because this would get at this issue that Gideon's talking about that we're all aware of, is the non-conforming structure section of the code is really hurting and needs a lot of work. You don't see them at the Planning Commission because they either go to Suzanne or the Board of County Commissioners. So you don't have experience in dealing with that section the way some of the planners in the community do and the staff. But it could be rewritten. I know it's another thing on the list of projects that Suzanne and the Community Development Department would have, but I think it could be taken on and you could address this problem of non-conforming structures. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. Next we'll do Joe Wells and then Cliff Weiss. No, okay, Joe Wells and then Gideon.
Joe Wells again. I submitted a letter to you, which it took a little while to get to you, but I believe it finally did get to you. I hope the form online, I hope that process will be cleaned up. So we don't have this issue in the future. I'm trying to limit. I raised a series of issues, one being the non-conforming structures issue, which I won't go into, or the previously approved planned unit developments issue, because that's not really affected by establishing a house cap. We now know for the first time that staff does intend that the 9250 limit will apply to those of us who have growth management allocations. As I mentioned earlier, there was a reason that growth management allocations were declared perpetual. And that reason was because the holders of those allocations had to comply with the things that they had promised in order to get an allocation. So having done that, those of us who helped draft the original growth management rules, of which I was a member of the planning staff at the time, felt it was only fair that those awards would be in perpetuity. That's been reaffirmed several times in various code amendments. But staff has concluded to recommend that anything over 9250 goes away, as I read the recommendation. And the same with regard to buyers of TDR certificates. If they bought those to increase their square footage, and their square footage would be more than 9250, presumably they wouldn't be able to use their TDR certificates that they purchased. I raised a series of issues, which I'm not going to go into the specifics of, that I consider to be unfair. Someone who has a meets and bounds parcel that is the same size as my parcel in Castle Creek Valley Ranch, which competed for 2 years in growth management and made significant contributions to the county in order to achieve their allocations, will have the same exact square footage limitation under this recommendation. I raised that issue before the committee. So I've been on record on that issue for a while. Now going to the packet itself, on page 58, there's a statement that residential buildings comprise 47% of Pitkin County's greenhouse gas emissions. The issue that I continue to have with that statement is that in recent years, you've adopted significant changes to the energy code. I don't believe there's been enough construction occurring under that energy code to really have a sense of what the effect of those changes are. So I think, in fairness, the 47% number is going to change over time, and it's just not accounted for in those figures. We've also talked about the committee wanting these recommendations to go forward as a group, so I won't go over that again. Then on Exhibit E, which is that map that shows Pitkin County, I know it's explained elsewhere in the proposed regulations, but I think it's a little confusing that there's a vast area around the perimeter that's indicated as having the 9250 cap when much of that area is zoned rural and remote. And I just think that's confusing. You do clear it up in the narrative that rural and remote sites would be limited to the square footage it's limited to, but I just find that confusing. And the last comment I'll make is on page 111 of the packet. I'm just wondering if it's totally clear in language elsewhere, whether in the UGB zone districts that have an FAR, whether it's clear that they may not be able to achieve a 9250 square feet maximum house size. I assume that's clear, but I didn't catch it. So that was kind of a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
I'll be very quick. Just want to reiterate what Glenn said about fairness. The county has a long history of fairness. And if you have received an approval, if you have an application deemed complete, there has been a long history of recognizing that it takes a long time to prepare an application. It takes a long time to get a pre-application conference. And so traditionally, the county has recognized that if you have an approval, even if it's not legally vested, if you have an approved application, that they recognize those given the amount of time and energy it takes. And I would hope that we would continue that same sense of fairness in the adoption of this. As far as the section I talked about a little bit before for nonconformity, you only have to change one section of the nonconformity at this time, and that's the nonconforming structure. And so I don't think it would take so long. And even if it took an extra 2 weeks, I think they ought to go dovetail together because it's a simple thing to do. It gives a lot of people a lot of comfort level. If you're already taking away from people the ability to build larger, why not give them at least the satisfaction of knowing that they're not going to be penalized for having a non-conforming structure as well? Thank you for your time.
And I'm just double checking the folks online. I think the phone number is Joe Kraybacher, and Mavis didn't talk at the last agenda item, so I think you can probably close.
So we can close public comment? Go ahead, Joe.
All right, so I guess I'd just kind of reiterate what I said before. I think the non-conforming structure provisions need to be addressed. And as to the pipeline rule that's been in effect, so to speak, for years, it was actually included in the 2006 land use code when that was completely rewritten. And again, people, have some reliance expectation on that. Excuse me, as to people that have provided the benefits associated with their gross management allotments. I think it borders on takings because the county got their exactions, but the applicant is now being, if this goes forward without those exceptions, is now being deprived of those approvals. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Yeah, I'll just make a comment really quick myself. I spoke to a bunch of people about this, what we're talking about this evening, and the people who I spoke to, my friends who are in the construction industry, that was the one thing that came across very clear was that applications that are in the pipeline and applications that have been processed in the amount of time and money and, between architects and design and the whole entire process end to end, which can be multiple years, that those agreements are honored. And so whatever sort of language, how staff interprets that language, it just grandfathered in is the way that I was kind of, feel about that. But yeah, and I agree with that. And also, this board is one who votes on the GMQS and allocates the square footage to these clients who come in and do these applications. And they spend a lot of time doing these applications. We spend a lot of time dealing with it. So I feel like that to dole out that square footage and then take it back is not, I feel like there needs to be some sort of process on how that GMQS that we've already allotted gets grandfathered in. And that's all. Yeah. Anyone else?
Well, where are we in this process as far as project rules? I mean, I'm happy to, from my perspective, the fairness, part is incredibly important. People that are in the process are in the process. You can't pull them out. And then, in the growth management committee, I think there's a strong, consensus, or if not unanimity. Yeah, if that's the case. So, and as Gideon said, it's a community value or whatever that we've had. So, people are in the process. Yeah. And you can't take vested rights, I would say as well. Yeah. TDR is another issue. That's a TDR, that's a completely different issue, but if you're in the process.
Yeah, and if you own a TDR, the TDR is landed, and when did it land, and is that in the pipeline, you know, that the TDR landed and then the application has been made and that square footage has been applied for or allocated, how, I don't know, it's pretty complicated. I guess I'd like to have language about how, you know, we make our recommendation to the board, whatever that is, how that gets expressed. Anybody else?
Yes,
Suzanne?
I agree with what has just been said about fairness. I think those things are apparent, and it's very clear that the Board of County Commissioners wants that. And I do too.
Okay, I guess. I'm not sure if we are, how far we are, if we need to, are we at a point where we're making, sort of
We
like,
could make it a trial motion.
would like to make a motion, or I'm not sure where we're.
So I guess maybe just to help a little with I mean, again, I think obviously everybody, I think, has, you know, pretty clear sentiments about sort of the, you know, whether it's referred to the pipeline rules or whatever.
Yeah.
We don't have that written yet. I mean, I feel like that's, you know, something we will be working on. I think it's totally appropriate for you all to make, you know, some statement to that effect. I don't think we were looking to try and have you all write that tonight,
Yeah.
you know, again, but I think to be able to clearly, you know, bring that forward, you know, as we move forward to the BOCC, you know, whether it's using the term, you know, the fairness, the pipeline rules, you know, we know what everybody's talking about. We will have, you know, definitely need to sit down, and that was the expectation, to really work out, you know, right, how do we write that? What is it? How do we determine all of that? So I think for your purposes, it can be sort of in that broad realm, is that, you know, if you're moving forward and looking to approve the resolution, that it would be with the expectation that, you know, moving forward to the BOCC, that would be included.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm like, there's something else. There's
Non-conforming.
something in my ear.
Yeah.
You know, I guess that's, I mean, another piece, I guess maybe question there, you know, Rye, if it's enough for the, you know, the P and Z to, I guess, sort of say, yes, moving forward, we'd like you to consider this. If there's a change to that language, it obviously has to come back to the P and Z to then move forward through that process. So I guess maybe that's for you all to think about, if you're wanting that to go forward with amendments, or you're saying, move this forward, but we want that to come next. You know, I mean, that's kind of, I guess, what we'd be looking for, is understanding, you know, what you're thinking about, how that comes. You know, I think Jasmine sort of used again, can we prioritize that coming back? Or is it more, we don't want to move some of this forward until we've also seen language about related to that?
Okay. Any thoughts from the board on whether or not we would like to see language on what we've talked about, non-conforming structures, how that language is going to get cleared up, and how the grandfathering in process and the pipeline, what that's going to look like? Or would we like to wait for that and we can table this until we get language, or we can vote on this now knowing that staff will provide further language on how we can go about those outstanding issues? Go ahead, Suzanne.
If we ask for the staff to come up with language clarifying those issues, Suzanne, how long would it take to come back with those?
Well, your next meeting is
Well, I think maybe we
the
should parse
seventh,
it out.
maybe it's breaking,
I
yeah,
think,
I think.
it's very clear the language that the P and Z wants to add to the resolution regarding the, what we're calling the fairness or pipeline rules. It seems like an amendment could be made to the existing resolution to include a recommendation to the BOCC that in connection with any land use code text amendment and or rezoning, that the Board of County Commissioners consider the pipeline, I'm just gonna call it the pipeline, we'll call it the pipeline rule, and make sure that people with vested rights are protected against the zoning changes that are in front of the P and Z today. It seems like the P and Z is generally in agreement about that and potentially ready to make a approve a resolution to recommend those changes to the BOCC with that amendment. The concept of rewriting the non-conforming structure provisions in the code would certainly be something that new proposed language would need to come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider. Of course, it's within the prerogative of the Planning and Zoning Commission to decline or table this motion until that comes back. Suzanne was about to give some dates that could happen before I cut her off, but it certainly is a more involved process, although it is a discrete provision of the code. I don't think we've had any definition here today of what the actual problem is. I'm not discounting the fact that the language is clunky and difficult to work with, but I don't think we have defined exactly what that problem is. If we're going to do that, I would imagine that we won't be coming back with this in November, and we'd be looking further out into December and potentially sometime after that. So,
You're speaking of the non-conforming issue. That would take a while, right?
relatively speaking.
I think at this point, I think what we're saying is we haven't delved into that at all. So I guess it's like, I don't know that we can speak right now to exactly, is that something simple or is it more complicated, and right, how much time that might take?
So I'm hearing there's 4 updates to the resolution, that we could make a resolution and amend it forward. To first, I should say, if John Peacock's here, he would say that we didn't want a moratorium, so then we should honor the pipeline, and that would be the easiest one. And so everyone, from a community standpoint, we're all better off. So I think that's actually the overarching issue. There wasn't a moratorium through a growth committee process. So honoring the pipe should be self-evident, but we should codify it in the resolution. I can't.
Glenn?
I just want to request clarification regarding the pipeline cases, because what I was talking about wasn't exactly what Rye just mentioned. It's parcels with vested property rights, as well as land use applications that have been deemed complete could continue. So I would ask that both of those class of land use applications and entitlements be addressed.
Yeah, that's just what I was, and that will be language that staff will need to define. The pipeline was a question that I had, and I was gonna actually ask Glenn, like, you can put for your clients is, if we have someone who has vested rights and they've reapplied it for every year for 10 years and they've been sitting on for X amount, is that the pipeline, or is the pipeline someone who, in the pipe can be very broad? So I guess that's up to staff when they bring us this language, like what is grandfathered in and what isn't. I'm sure it's extremely broad. That was just a thought.
So yeah, I was gonna say there's 3 additions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Through one of them.
Yeah.
The county didn't want a moratorium, so there were 2 parts, and respecting both Q, what's already deemed complete with planning, and as well, existing vested rights, for example, just what we awarded last week in the NQS goes forward. And so I think both those should be codified. We're not gonna write language tonight. Yeah. The third part I heard from Joe Wells was remove Star Mesa. And the fourth part was, that at some point in the fourth quarter or early Q1, that staff can come back with updates to chapter 9, I'm assuming, which would make this a better resolution that would cover the conversation tonight. Doesn't address the one issue with regards, what's left over in the TDR. But that's another night.
Just one quick comment, and that is, the devil is in the detail.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of the P and Z members have very strong feelings about fairness. And I know this is going to go to the Board of County Commissioners soon, so the staff is going to have to address that if it goes to the board. So I would urge that, that you at least see that language before it goes to the board, so you have your input as opposed to putting staff in the position of having to draft the language. So I think that it has to be adopted if what you're saying is true. So I would urge you to at least see the language, give your feedback, because that's one of the values of Planning and Zoning Commission. So the board has that benefit. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess my response to that is the language, as I understand what's being proposed by Glenn and Gideon, is very simple. It's applications that have been deemed complete and properties that have secured vested rights. Of
This
course,
property is already in the permit process.
Right, and there's no like loopholes or there's no anything it's pretty simple, like it's all encompassing. Like, I just want to make sure there's nothing we're missing.
there's a smart group of land planners and attorneys out there that surely will try and find some kind of loopholes to work into any of this that goes on.
Well, what I was meaning is some people, I didn't mean loophole like that. I meant people who had a right or some sort of building right, or were in some sort of a process and fell through the cracks and then did not, that's what I was getting at. Yeah, go ahead.
And staff might address this as well, but getting into your point, any resolution that's updated that's not in front of us this evening still goes through DocuSign and generally comes to the board chair before it's out for signature. So that language is vetted and circulated prior to, and generally we rely on the board chair to review that final solution.
There's just a lot of different points of view that should be implemented.
But it gives you 3 checkpoints, right? You've got staff, the legal profession, as well as the board chair. And usually we entitle the board chair or respect the board chair to review that language before it goes out for signature.
And I guess the other.
That's not correct. I don't see anything before it goes to BOCC after. I've only signed 1 resolution so far since April. So I don't review them before they go up to BOCC.
If it's a P and Z resolution, then the chair has to sign it. So I mean, that's the opportunity to review it. So I guess I don't know what's been in front of the P and Z. So I think what I wanted to say about the applicability provisions or the pipeline provisions is that's not something we're codifying. So again, the resolution you're adopting has specific code language. Again, I think that's why I'm thinking in general terms, you can be specific about the things you're specific about, but also just say, sort of speak to the broader fairness, because that would be included in the BOCC ordinance as to the applicability of what they are adopting. So that's really where that language is going to live. So again, that's why I wasn't thinking it was that you needed to see the specific language coming back before you. That you're saying we want you to honor the pipeline rule. Here are some of the specifics we see, and clearly that's going to be sort of, filled out as we move forward to the BOCC.
Joe, did you have a comment?
Just want to call to your attention that there are one set of people who hold land use approvals that aren't necessarily covered under vesting, because those of us who have growth management allocations and who have complied with our side of the deal haven't necessarily continued to revest every 3 years to still be vested, because we've been told that our approvals are in perpetuity. So that class of recipients aren't covered.
Yeah, and that's something we can have staff clean up for with the definition of what the pipeline is. So I guess what I'm looking for right now is if anyone has a motion to either vote on what we're looking at right now with the additions to the request for the additional language that we've asked from staff, or do we want to have a continuance and then wait and vote on this all together with the language that we've requested included so we get to see it?
I'd move that we move to approve the resolution as amended by Jeffrey. My language isn't correct, I apologize, but the 4 points to Jeffrey as presented here without going to a continuum.
Great, thanks. Do we have a second?
I would second.
Second by Jasmine, okay. And then roll call vote here.
Just,
Or do you want?
just, just
Discussion, sorry, yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself. Go ahead, Jim.
just a quick question for staff. Did Joe articulate a third category that we need to cover and protect via the pipeline language? Yeah, I heard two categories from the planning side. Did I hear a third from Joe? And we need to protect all three. Is that what we're doing in this resolution?
I don't think I have a quick answer to Joe's piece. I mean, I think it's, really looking at what.
I think the community fairness would play, and we would look at all three in this conversation. If that can take place.
I mean, that's.
Without
you all-
setting the resolution.
Yeah.
Right.
We heard a third piece come in after I said here before. So
So
I would say,
I would look to you all to either include that or not in what you're asking us to move forward.
so I'm looking to the person who made the motion, which was, I heard three. I heard property rights, vested terms, growth management, got exaction, and then completed with planning. I think three, but in the queue was the third one.
Yeah.
And I don't
I'm hearing three use cases, if you will, that all are desiring to be protected under the current.
And in permit, or did you? I wasn't sure what you would.
Completed to me would be completed with planning. I mean, it could be in building, it could be in for building, it's already gone through plan.
So in my realm, deemed complete means you've submitted an application. We have deemed it complete. You're moving forward based on the rules in effect at that time. So that's a planning application. Obviously, if you're in for permit as well, presumably you have the planning approval that led up to that. If you have a permit that has been deemed complete essentially and is moving through that process or has already been issued, those are the other ones that I mentioned.
So I guess I'm asking to amend Doug's.
I would ask, what is it that Joe is asking for? I mean, if it's an existing residence, I'm not clear about how we're protecting Joe Wells. What is he asking us to protect?
Well, I'm just
That's what I'm not clear on.
just telling you that there are people out there, including myself, who are not vested, but who have received a growth management allocation and have complied with what they said they would do as a part of that application. So we're not covered by a statement that we're in the queue, we're certified complete, and we're not covered under vesting, because many of us, I suspect, have allowed our vesting to lapse, since it lapses every 3 years.
And if I can be specific, and if it's not appropriate, let me know. But if you're in a community, if you're in an area that is capped at 5750, which I believe the Fern Creek is 5750 now, I think that's your area, but the subdivision is not. Or so I'm not understanding what right, what you've been given that you haven't used, that's not vested, that's not clear in my mind.
I think, Doug, yeah, maybe I can help. So there are a lot of growth management allotments that have been granted, for the most part, for additional floor area back to 2000. When we first did 5750 and people came in, and at that time they could get a growth management allotment without a site plan included with it. It was just, you know, can you meet these criteria? I'll commit to do X, Y, Z. If they haven't used that allotment, they may or may not have done anything related to that. Most things at that time, commitments you made would be met when you utilize the allotment. So there are a lot of those out there. Then there's variations along over time where ones may have been granted with a site plan in more recent time, but they may not have used that allotment yet. So I mean, again, there's a lot of variations there, but I guess it all ties back to, I guess, looking at what does it mean for anybody who has obtained a growth management allotment?
And you said
in the
that
past.
earlier that allotments that were granted prior to 2020 have been codified, so
they
have those. So what we're proposing now, is that going to supersede what we're?
So the allotment itself does not lapse, but what we're saying is that, that's not vested. So if you got an allotment and you were allowed to build 12,000 square feet, but that may date back however long. You come in today, you can still use the allotment, but you can only use it up to the amount that where the cap is now. So you wouldn't be able to build 12,000, you would be at 9250. So it may be that you're using, a smaller portion of that allotment.
And Joe, tell me if I'm wrong, the reason why people with a GMQS allotment may or may not have followed up with their applications or use that square footage yet is because in the code that GMQS footage or square footage exists in the right to use that when it's been allotted exists in perpetuity. So,
Prior to 2020,
okay.
in 2020, you established a 5-year cap for the use of your allocations, but in 2020, when the code was amended, it still said allocations awarded prior to 2020, May 23rd or something, 2020, do not expire. I can't honestly tell you how many people who have obtained a growth management allocation have complied by doing what they said they would do. Those of us like myself who have obtained a building permit have certainly done that. So the class that I'm in, I know have satisfied their commitments that they made under growth management.
I guess I just say staff knows what this board is looking for. We'll give you the time to create that language that expresses, that covers all these aspects. Go ahead, Chelsea.
Sorry, I strongly agree with Joe's point earlier that if you limit and to 9250, someone who has an allocation to go beyond that now, after they've already paid their exactions for historic GMQS allotments, that is a taking. A governmental
Yeah,
take.
that's what we're talking about. We're talking about honoring that. And
So
having staff create language that reflects our intention to not have that happen. We're
Okay,
just asking to find the pipeline so that never happens.
I just wanted to make sure us as a commission were in consensus that we would direct staff to include that language and that it is in fact included. And it's so important that I don't see a reason for there to be a delay of 2 weeks to make sure that we get an opportunity to review it. Because as the chair, I don't review things prior to them going up to the BOCC for a review later. So I don't just want to make sure that that's in there before we vote on a resolution to approve the text amendment changes tonight.
And Chelsea, are you, what Joe Wells was saying is that we should respect this, that previously approved growth management allocations approved before, allocations given before 2020 stand approved in perpetuity.
Correct. Yes.
And I guess the question there would be whether they have done anything in reliance upon that or not, because they're clearly ones that have done nothing. You know, again, may not have obtained a permit, may not have done anything in reliance upon that approval. So again, I think you'd want to be clear about ones who did covenants, maybe made donation, did things in reliance on that or not.
Yeah, I think it's a very nuanced discussion, given the way that the prior GMQS approvals have been previously granted to. It almost requires an approval by approval analysis of how that allotment has been used, if it has been used, whether it's been partially used, whether the triggering event for meeting your GMQS commitments is at building permit. There are GMQS allotments out there that people haven't come in for a building permit, so nobody's satisfied any of those conditions of approval or follow through with their commitments. So there's a nuance to almost every one of these approvals based on the time frame that they have used or not used the allotment.
Yeah. And I guess that's what we could, because of the complexity, we could give staff the time to look into that and figure that out and give us the language back, give them the time and not. That obviously it's a complex issue. It needs some time to be looked at, be my thought. And obviously that the board's intention is to honor all square footage that's been allotted. Anybody else? I guess what we're doing is, Joe. Go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to add one other nuance, not that we need more nuances to this. I'm not sure this would actually apply. But in the same kind of category of a GMQS allotment, whether it's been acted on or not, I guess is going to be, a question for how we deal with it. But do we have any situations where people have bought TDRs, they've landed the TDRs, they've extinguished the TDRs, but they haven't built that square footage yet? How are those going to be handled? There you go. One more.
I mean, so the TDR has been purchased, it's been landed, but then the development for that extra square footage that the TDR is allocated has not been used. I mean, by definition, right, if you landed a TDR, you're in the pipeline. That would be my interpretation.
You've landed a TDR with a building permit.
Because you can't land one without some sort of an application, so. You could, or.
Sorry, at the point you've extinguished a TDR, you are in the building permit process, and being reviewed for a permit for a specific development utilizing that TDR.
So, yeah.
So at that point, you're.
Yeah. So Joe, by definition, if they landed the TDR, then they're in the pipeline. And they're extinguished the TDR. Extinguished the building rights, yeah.
But just owning a TDR, you could be gambling.
Correct.
Yeah, you just you haven't begun any process. Yeah.
It's very difficult to hear when people are talking over each other. So, if we could, try and see if one person that's time can talk. But let's say we have a situation where someone had landed a TDR for 2,500 square feet, but they haven't come in yet. They only built 1,000 square feet of it. Did they lose their additional 1,500 square feet? Or do they have to be in the pipeline for a building permit or a land use approval in order to be able to fully realize, the fact that they bought a TDR and extinguished it because, you can't use them partially until the new code comes in when we're going to talk about doing 500 square foot increments. Anyway, I just wanted to add that. I don't know if there's any specifics out there in terms of particular projects where that would apply. But I think, again, in the concept of the fairness, it'd only be fair if someone paid for a TDR and landed it and haven't used all of the square footage associated with the TDR, that they'd still be entitled to use that square footage. That was just my only comment.
I understand where you're going with that, Joe. And I don't think I have an answer, but I understand.
Okay.
We have a motion by Jeffrey, is that correct?
I made a
Oh, sorry
motion,
about that.
Jeffrey, I think you modified it with my approval. That makes sense.
And I second
And Jasmine seconded,
That was-
and that,
Yeah.
that's been, and that included our request for the, everything we've gone over for the additional language and Star Mesa pipeline definition, GMQS questions and non-conforming structures, right? Were those the?
And there was the Joe Wells sort of, I have the GM2S. law.
Right, and that, yeah, in GMQS. Okay, so I would be taking a roll call vote on that motion. And Jasmine,
yes.
yes. Suzanne? Wait, oh, Suzanne, we can't hear you.
Yes.
Yes, Chelsea,
Yeah, I'm gonna abstain.
abstain, Joe,
I'd prefer to see the language before I vote, but I'm generally in favor. Assuming that
Okay.
what we talked about actually comes through in the language based upon all the discussion we've had here.
okay, and I'm a yes. Jeffrey?
Yes.
And Doug made the motion, so
Yes.
he's obviously a yes. All right, there we go.
As I understand what we just voted on.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yes, we voted on the resolution with these comments, and we're not holding it up to get the language. We're hoping to see the language, but it's going forward to the VOCC, and I folks going to do another meeting. That's what I understand.
That's my understanding.
Very good.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
And the BOCC will have their own ordinance.
Yes. Any further comments?
Thank you very much for the staff. This is a really complicated thing, and I think it was very well presented and very well explained.
And thank you to everyone who spent all their time on the growth committee.
Yes,
And I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
There we go.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh.
Please do.
Bye, guys.